The regular season can't get here soon enough. One more preseason game left, but hey, we got week 0 of the college football season. That means we can start to look towards the 2025 NFL draft. Who better to bring on, talk some draft, talk some rookies from the previous draft class than our guy, Trevor Sikemma, all over the place. Of course, PFF lead draft analyst and co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast with Connor Rogers over there. It's just fantastic work. They did their breakdown as far as what the Cardinals needed to do this offseason, and they did some really intriguing things. Trev, how we doing, my man?
Fellas, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on the show as always on the eve of the regular season. I know we were just chit-chatting before we hit record, but it's funny, like we wait so long. It's like, oh, finally, football is back. And then we're sitting here like, all right, well, I actually wanted to see the starters a little bit more during the preseason. It feels like that's kind of all over the place throughout the NFL. So I know that all fans, Cardinals fans included, are excited to get the regular season kicked off. So I'm excited to talk about it here with you.
Yeah, football's back, but is it really back? We were chatting about Marvin Harrison Jr. and while he made a brief appearance in the first preseason game for all but it's 3 snaps I think he took. Most of his damage has been done in practice, and I know, Trev, you've had an opportunity to see a little bit of that, but like just what you've seen from snippets on the Twitter streets and what you've written and what you've read, like, is he living up to your expectations? Because again, like Malik Neighbors is getting targeted, I think, in New York Giants preseason outings, like 1 out of every 3 passes from Daniel Jones. Like, that's not Marv yet, but I think when we fast forward to week 1, that's very much going to be the expectation of everybody here in the Valley.
I think so. And that's what we're seeing, right? I mean, like even just the handful of training camp clips that we've seen from him, it shows you that they're going to lean on him a ton in the passing game. And yeah, Malik Neighbors is obviously playing a little bit more during these preseason games. And we knew that they were going to build that passing offense around him. And I don't know if it's going to be quite to Neighbors level, because I feel like the drop off between Malik Neighbors and the next guy that they would want to go to for the Giants, all due respect to them as NFL players, it's not as far of a drop as like, okay, like obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., we expect him to handle wide receiver 1 responsibilities, but like I think this could be a big year for Michael Wilson, right? I think that obviously Trey McBride is somebody who they have a lot of faith in as well. This is a running game that they absolutely love, where again, like you compare and contrast like Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Neighbors, they're still trying to figure out the run game with the Giants. So like truly everything, the only piece of the identity that they know they're going to lean into is with Malik Neighbors in New York. And I just think that the ball is going to get spread out a little bit more, especially when you have a quarterback that has the ability to do it. Again, all due respect to Daniel Jones. But Kyler Murray, I have a little bit more faith in to really be able to spread the love around a little bit. So that's what you want, though. I think we want to see those high-end plays from him. It doesn't have to quite be the volume of he's going to lead every single rookie receiver in every single category. It feels like he's still going to be exactly what this offense needs going into this year.
We have seen a couple of their draft picks, actually a pretty successful run in the first 2 games from their entire draft class. And I want to get to Xavier Thomas. I want to get to Robert Taylor-Demerson, who was a PFF darling this past week, highly graded out. But let's stay in the first round real quick. We have seen a little bit more of a sample size from Darius Robinson, 10 snaps in his first game. What are realistic expectations for Darius going into his first year with the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, right? And I think it's something that's worth talking about for people that cover the beat like you do, where, Darius Robinson, really good, just overall football player. Like he's somebody that you want on your team. But when you look at him and his skill set, especially his journey from Missouri to kind of where he is now, started out as an interior defensive lineman, loses a little bit of weight. They put him out towards the edge because they noticed like, hey, this guy's got a lot of explosiveness. We might be able to play him as that kind of heavy-handed 4-3 powerful defensive end in our system. And Missouri got a lot of return on him. Now, it wasn't truly like a stat stuffing season at Missouri. So you're not going to expect to see a ton of that in the NFL, especially as a rookie. So if Darius Robinson ends up getting somewhere between like 4 to 6 sacks this season, I don't want people to look at him and go, man, what a bust this was. Like he can't even get after the passer. He is in his own journey right now. And I think that when you go back to especially the Senior Bowl, which is a pivotal part of the draft process for him and what ended up allowing him to become a first-round pick, is it felt like no matter who he was going up against, the size, the strength, the power, that was just NFL level already, even for the first couple of practice snaps that we watched down in Mobile. So for him, he is as much, Darius Robinson to me is as much of a, I'm elevating the floor of the defensive line as much as what you hope is elevating the ceiling as well. It just means that no matter what you call, and Jonathan Gannon, we saw this when he was in Philadelphia, it was a really deep defensive line in Philadelphia. They want to be rotational. They want to be multiple. Yeah, you're going to kind of have your structure that you like to go to with the guys, and you're going to emphasize a lot of their strengths. But with Darius Robinson, to me, it was like okay, well, if they want to play 3 down linemen this play, or if they want to play 4 down linemen the next, or if they want to go to a bear front on the goal line, like this is somebody who you can expect to play at a high level for you, not look lost, not look overpowered, no matter what the formation is. We throw around the word versatility a lot when draft season comes around. Not everybody actually holds up to that word the way that I think a lot of draft analysts just kind of talk about it. But Robinson truly is. And so you're right, not a ton of snaps from him in the preseason, but he is somebody who, if he's not a sack master this year, it's okay. Like, I think that it can still be viewed as a successful season for him if a lot of the other stuff is going well around him, if he's keeping the linebackers clean behind him, if he's holding the line of scrimmage very well and opening things up for those guys on the interior too. So I think that for him, it's going to be much more of a, you got to really watch the games, and selfishly, I'll say the PFF grades beyond just those sack stats that a lot of people like to look at.
Trev, if we could, let's stick on the Cardinal defensive line. About 2.5 weeks ago, they lost what a lot of people thought was going to be their sack master for 2024. And unfortunately, B.J. Ojulari tearing his ACL.
Yeah.
And we're at the point in the offseason, if you can even call it that, the preseason, where there aren't a lot of options, if any, to replace Ojulari. And right now, it looks like they're very much sticking to the in-house approach. They're going to try to go maybe a collective mixed bag from everybody. And then yet there's a player out in New York that's got a rapport with Jonathan Gannon in Hassan Reddick, who may or may not be available. The Cardinals potentially inquiring on Hassan Reddick. Like, what's your take on his potential availability? And would you see this being an avenue in which the Cardinals could and would explore if the Jets are finally like, we're done doing this, we're going to move on, we're going to go with the guys we have in house?
Yeah, it's really tough to lose a player when you do, especially one that you had a lot of hopes for, like Ojulari. I was really excited to see him as well this year. I know my co-host over at the NFL Stock Exchange, Connor Rogers, he was big on Ojulari during that draft class. And so we're excited to see it. And so it just, the timing sucks. The fact that it happened sucks. Obviously, Hassan Reddick being out there makes things intriguing, because normally, when you say like, hey, they're kind of looking in-house, a lot of times when you get to this point of the year, you don't really have any other choice, right? You're trying to manage and come up with the best 53-man roster that you can amongst the guys that you sort of chose and drafted and signed as undrafted free agents. So you're really focused on the guys that are in-house. Anyways, it's hard to do a lot of scouting outside of the building, especially for a lot of players that at this point in time, let's face it, the good pass rushers already are on teams. Like it's not like it's sort of like offensive tackles, right? Good pass protectors. They ain't just sitting out there, right? And if they are, there's kind of a reason why. So Reddick being sort of available, I guess, like the Jets have kind of come out and said, like, we're not trading you. But at the same time, it's like, all right, well, if you can get value for somebody that's not going to play for you, where is the give and take? Like, where is the end of the journey here for Hassan Reddick? Is it going to be staying with the Jets, or is it going to be elsewhere? He'd be a huge help to this Arizona Cardinals defense. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Again, I think that they were really looking for increased production from B.J. Ojulari, and they were hoping that, like you mentioned, like he could be their sack leader this year. So you would be able to bring in a guy like Reddick, who would have familiarity with Gannon's defense, had success in that in the alignment that he had him in. And so there's no doubt about it. I'm sure that Monty Ossenfort has reached out, whether it's something that's sort of like public or not, like just to figure out, like, hey, what's the price? Are we interested in this at all? Or is Joe Douglas picking up the phone and just saying, no, stop calling? So whatever it is, you pick up the phone and you figure it out, because you're right. If he could make his way back to Arizona, this time as more of an edge rusher, it would be something that could really help out this team.
I've had to tell Johnny that myself. I say, hey, man, just a text will suffice, man. And stop calling me. It's 10 o'clock at night. My kid's asleep. Hey, speaking about that edge rush unit, somebody who's flashed this preseason has been Xavier Thomas. Not super productive at Clemson. He was on the Van Wilder program. He played 6 seasons in Clemson. He was on the 2018 team with Isaiah Simmons, my guy.
Yeah.
But, 2 sacks in 2 games. I know, the Colts offensive tackle fell down literally on one play, but still got to the quarterback. Did anything point to Xavier Thomas's game to where he could be more productive at the NFL level than he was at the collegiate level?
Oh, I think 100%. I mean, I had him as the 10th best edge rusher in last year's class. And I think that the talent level that this guy has is very obvious. I mean, he was a 5-star player. I think he was like the number 3 overall player in that 2018 recruiting class. You know, wow. It took him a little bit to kind of figure it out when he was at Clemson. And then it was sort of this timing. I think it was his junior year. Maybe it was his senior year. I can't remember. He just like had a bunch of injuries, and it just ended up being like terrible timing. And
he was up like, over 300 pounds.
Right. Yeah. And he talked about that. I think that was after COVID maybe, or I can't remember exactly what the timeline was, but when you look at it, you go, okay, why was this guy in college for so long? And when you actually look at his journey, you can look at it and say, okay, this actually makes sense. I'm not just trying to cope here. Like, we're not just looking at this through rose-colored glasses. It does make sense why he was at Clemson as long as he was. And it also makes sense that he could still be a impactful player at the NFL level. I remember watching him at the East-West Shrine Bowl this past year. And I mean, he was destroying offensive tackles. It felt like every day he had what could have been the play of the day, especially from the trenches and the defensive lines from both practice teams. So this is a really talented football player, extremely explosive, violent, fast hands. He doesn't he doesn't have the bend that some of those other pass rushers do, but the frenetic play style in a good way. I mean, he looks like he sucks to block. Like, he's just when you have offensive tackles who are trying to stay in front of him, I mean, he is chopping at the forearms, the hands are going everywhere. It's the motor is running hot at all times. And the pass rushers, sometimes I found that it's the pass rushers that are the most annoying that maybe can be the ones that consistently get into the backfield. And when you combine that sort of motor with the explosiveness that Xavier Thomas has, I figured that this would also be a little bit of a learning curve for him, but I also like the scheme in which Jonathan Gannon plays for him to be able to do a lot of 2-point stand-up outside linebacker rusher type of work. So I do like Xavier Thomas as somebody who could be a surprise little fill-in to make up at least sort of a little bit of that production that you were hoping to get from Ojulari.
At the time of this recording, Trev, PFF has the highest graded day 3 picks available from 2024's draft. And at the top by a rather large margin with 88.8, 4th rounder for the Cardinals safety, Taylor-Demerson. And we've had an opportunity to watch him. And it's not just the grades. He jumps off screen with his play. An interception last week against the Colts, bunch of tackles for losses in the preseason week 1. You know, we always joke on the show, Jonathan Gannon's a kingmaker of defensive back play, specifically safety. He was defensive back safety himself at the University of Louisville. And you think about Budda Baker, last year of his contract, Taylor-Demerson slides right in this preseason as kind of an impact player. I mean, is there a reality right now with his trajectory, albeit through 2 games, where this kid's not vying for a starting role this time next year?
Yeah, no, I believe it 100%. Like, this is another guy that I got to watch firsthand at the East-West Shrine Bowl. And I remember, I have a lot of practice notes that I'll take throughout the day. And one of the first practice notes that I had from the first practice in the defense that he was a part of was, this is day 1. And he was talking to the other safety and the linebacker in front of him, telling them where to be. It's day 1. This is a new coaching staff. He got plopped down with this coaching staff and this playbook at the same time as everybody else. And he's sitting here day 1, like, no, you're over here. I'm over here. This is the check. Like, this is what we're doing. And I saw him, get a couple of interceptions in practice as well. And, I think there's always some nuance to sort of sometimes these interceptions that you get in practice. And the throws could look so bad where it's like, oh, of course he had an interception. The throw was so bad. But with DTD's interception that I specifically remember watching in practice, it was an overthrow, right? I mean, like, the throw was, it was an overthrow. It was not a good throw. But DTD was right there to get it. And I go, that's also a skill, though, because you think about, you are even in the area to capitalize on a missed throw. He was exactly where he needed to be, but it wasn't as much like, oh, just right place, right time. He just got lucky. No, he put himself at the right place at the right time. And I think when you watch this past game, and I watched all of his snaps against the Colts, because I saw his high grade as well, and I was super excited about it. The confidence in which he moves already is not normal for a rookie safety. Think about all of the ground and responsibility that you have as a rookie safety.
Yeah.
You have to cover so much ground. There's so much responsibility on you. It's that battle in your head of like, okay, do I get aggressive and try to go make a play on the ball because I'm trying to stand out in camp? Or do I make sure that I am truly a safety, if you will, and don't give up the big play over top of me? It's the inner battle that every single safety has. And it felt like he just made the right decisions almost every single time when I watched him against the Colts. So yeah, I'm not trying to, blow it up too much because again, it's preseason, but for him to be so confident day one of Shrine Bowl practices, and for him to already look as confident as he does in game 2 of the preseason with the Cardinals, to me, that tells me, all right, what I saw in draft season was not a fluke. This is a confident, smart football player who feels like he is going to be a starter sooner rather than later in this league.
Last question for our guy, Trevor Sikemma. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Tampa Bay Trey for all the draft insight. You're checking out the PFF Fantasy Mock Draft Simulator. It's going to get you ready for all your big days for your team out there. And, of course, the NFL Draft Mock Simulator, which is elite. I've got it up actually in front of me right now because my last question is, at this time last year, we were all locking in. Like, Johnny and I have no allegiance to the Midwest, to Ohio State, but we were scarlet and gray the entire season starting now because of Marv. We were locking in for that. Things kind of shift, it feels like this year, kind of maybe looking to the defensive side of the football. We talked about the edge. Who are a couple key college players that Cardinals fans should keep an eye on starting maybe as early as this week?
Yeah, I mean, there's, we just went through, especially I'll stick with the defensive line unless you guys want me to go elsewhere. But, defensive line specifically, you look at the interior players, Mason Graham could be from Michigan, could be the first defensive tackle taken number 1 overall since 1994. Wow. I mean, this dude is that good. Now, I will say, of course, it's sort of the door is open a little bit because the quarterback class is not as solidified as it was. Like if Caleb Williams were in this upcoming class, okay, we'd still be talking about him at number 1. But Mason's a damn good player. I think he's a top 5 type of a player in this class. He might just be the number 1 overall player on my big board going into the season. I got one more position at safeties to kind of figure out before I get the final preseason big board out there. But man, his teammate Kenneth Grant at Michigan as well, a unique, massive, almost like 350, 340 pound defensive lineman, but he's got quick footwork. He's got a little finesse to his game. Jim Harbaugh called Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham gifts from the football gods. That's how he talked about these interior defensive linemen. Deion Walker is 6'6", 350 pounds. The defensive tackle from Kentucky. I mean, he is somebody who obviously has a first round ceiling as well. There's a couple other guys that are very exciting on the interior defensive line class. And then you don't have an edge rusher like a Nick Bosa or a Jadeveon Clowney or a Myles Garrett that's going to command 100% like that number 1 overall spot. But there's a lot of good edge rushers there. There's a lot of guys who I think could litter the first round, even though it's not going to be necessarily in that top 3. Nick Scourton, who is at Purdue, now at Texas A&M. He is my number 1 edge rusher going in the class. Mykel Williams, a top recruit from Georgia. He's been playing ever since he was a true freshman. Now he is draft eligible. They're putting him as more of a stand-up outside linebacker, pass rusher, edge rusher, instead of a defensive end that he was last season. So I think he'll open it up. Abdul Carter from Penn State and James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee have some of the best first step explosiveness that we have seen in a long damn time for these top edge rushers. I mean, Abdul Carter wears number 11 for Penn State, and you watch him play and you just go, how do they keep getting these freak athletes on the defensive line, man, every single year? First it was Micah Parsons, then it was Chop Robinson. Now you're just reloading with another guy. So a lot of big names. And like you mentioned, we're going to be updating the PFF Mock Draft Simulator certainly right before the season starts, but I'm going to update it with the draft order and my scouting reports as college football goes on. So you guys and your listeners, whenever you want to dip your toe into the water of draft season, it's going to be right there for you.
Check out his big board right now, pff.com. He's got 8 Ohio State Buckeyes in the top 50. Cardinals go with an Ohio State Buckeye each of the last 2 years. I'm not saying it's fate, but maybe we can pencil in.
Their rival sounds good with those big guys on that defensive line. I wouldn't mind that.
It's just go what works. And what works for us, Trevor Sikemma, PFF NFL lead draft analyst. Thank you so much for your time, Trev. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
We all silly like the mayor.